call 888-9-TCM-SHOP.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Ben Mankiewicz. Thanks for joining us tonight on TCM. For the next few hours, we're going to be highlighting the careers of two distinctly talented directors, the great Orson Welles, and a man who became one of his closest friends, Henry Jaglom. The two formed an unexpected bond toward the end of Welles' life, a friendship detailed in the book, My Lunches with Orson. And joining me tonight for a slate of films from both Welles and Jaglom is Henry Jaglom himself. Thanks for being here, Henry.
My pleasure beyond my ability to express it.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much. The first film Henry and I have tonight is the picture that alerted Hollywood and the movie-loving world that Orson Welles was a force, a director unlike any other. From 1941, directed by Welles, produced by Welles, starring Welles, the writing credit we'll talk about, of course, and the movie is Citizen Kane. So, in talking to Orson Welles, as you became close to him, you got him to star in one of your movies, 1971, correct?
In my first movie, A Safe Place, yeah.
And then you reconnected with him later.
Well, years later, I ran into him at a restaurant we both hung out at called Ma Maison. And I hadn't heard from him in a couple of years, and I said, "How are you?" And he said, "I've lost my girlish enthusiasm." Huh. And I said, "Oh, God, what does that mean?" He said, "You have time for lunch?" And we sat down, and he told me all the disasters that he'd been engaged in for the past couple of years. All the difficulties, all the projects that didn't happen, all the things that seemed to be about to happen and didn't. And it was very sad. And I started sort of having more and more frequent lunches with him and decided that to use whatever energies. I was at that time making one independent film after another, and I decided whatever time I had in between making these films, I would try to dedicate to getting Orson financing, which seemed to me, it was not going to be a difficult problem. This was Orson Welles, after all. And it turned out to be quite something else.
Let's talk about the movie that we're going to show tonight. How did Orson Welles view Citizen Kane in the last years of his life? What did he think about it?
Well, the words that he would use about Citizen Kane were the same. He used them so many times. When I brought it up, he would say, "It was pretty good." So I said, "Yeah, pretty good." What he said to me when my first film, which he was in, A Safe Place, got the worst reviews possibly in the history of filmdom. He said, "You're very lucky, Henry, because you're starting at the bottom and have nowhere to go but up. I started at the top and I had nowhere to go but down. And no matter what I did, they decided that it was down."
The years that you were having lunch with him, though, he was not retired. He wanted very much. The ideas were still there, and the eagerness to work was still there.
And I got him to write a brand new script. And the other side of the wind, as it turned out to be, was as much, would have been, had we gotten it made, as much of a bookend to the 20th century as Kane was the front part of the 20th century, that introduction to the 20th century. It was a brilliant script. And I went to all these people, all of whom I knew loved, you know, Orson and wanted to meet him, wanted to have lunch with him. And one by one, they turned this script down. They turned every other project I came to them with down.
Do you have any insight as to why?
Sure. It's really terribly simple. None of Orson's movies ever made money, including Citizen Kane. None of them. So the bottom line in Hollywood is make money. If your films don't make money, you might be celebrated as a great artist, as he was. Everybody may want to have lunch with him and hang out with him and give him honors, but no one wanted to finance a film to someone who made films that never made any money.
Right.
It's that simple.
Before we air the movie, I want to ask you about the writing credit for Citizen Kane. What was his reaction to the writing controversy, for a lack of a...
He claimed that he always gave Mankiewicz the credit. That myth that he insisted on having his name on it as the writer as well is a myth. That was apparently RKO.
Right, because he had it in the contract, and that was the way they sold the movie.
Exactly.
Right.
He said without him, there would have been no film. He said that he worked on the script, changed some things, but it was essentially Mankiewicz's. That's what he said in person. I think he got carried away sometimes in interviews when he talked about my film,
Right.
and the others tended to do that. And I think that was irresponsible of him. But he never, to me, in a lot of personal conversations, minimized the role that the writer of that film deservedly should have gotten.
Well, as a grandson of Herman Mankiewicz, I would gladly take that answer. So let's take a look at the movie. From 1941, with that brilliant cast, Everett Sloane, George Coulouris, Agnes Moorehead, Dorothy Common-Gore, and of course, Joseph Cotten and Orson Welles, with screenplay credit going to Welles and Herman Mankiewicz. Here's Citizen Kane.